The Zycran Empire had conquered countless worlds, leaving civilizations in ruins and species extinct. Their empress, Queen Zyra, sat upon her throne, her piercing violet eyes scanning the holographic projection before her. The image displayed a blue-green planet, small compared to the many celestial bodies she had claimed as her own. Earth. The next world to fall. She leaned back, resting one sharp-clawed finger against her chin. Reports from the last invasion suggested that humanity was weaker than anticipated. The first assault had nearly wiped them out, yet still, they clung to survival like insects refusing to be crushed underfoot. Their technology was primitive, their weapons no match for the Zycran war machines. And yet, there was something that bothered her. Something that didn't quite fit. Her top general, a battle-scarred warrior named Drekvar, stepped forward and saluted with a fist to his chest. "The fleets are ready, my queen. The humans will not withstand another attack. Their defenses are fragile, their armies scattered." His deep voice echoed through the grand chamber, where her most trusted commanders stood in silence. Zyra's lips curled into a smirk. "Then why do they still exist?" Drekvar hesitated. It was a dangerous thing to question the queen, but she demanded answers. He exhaled slowly before responding. "During our last engagement, we expected them to surrender. It would have been the logical choice. Their capital was in flames, their leaders dead. But they fought to the last man. They refused to kneel, refused to beg. And then, there was him." Zyra raised an eyebrow. "Him." A new image appeared in the holographic projection, a man in battered combat armor, his face streaked with blood and dirt, standing atop a pile of fallen soldiers. His eyes burned with defiance even as fire rained from the sky. "Ryan Carter. The last warrior," Drekvar said grimly. "He was responsible for the destruction of our flagship during the final assault. We believed him to be dead, but our latest intelligence suggests otherwise." Zyra scoffed. "One man." The very idea was laughable. The Zycran war machine had crushed entire species, exterminated entire civilizations, and yet her best general stood here speaking of a single human as if he were some kind of unstoppable force. "You fear this creature?" she asked, amusement flickering in her voice. Drekvar's jaw tightened. "Not fear, my queen. Caution. We underestimated humanity once. This man is more than just a soldier. He is their symbol. If he stands, they stand. If he falls, they will finally break." Zyra waved a dismissive hand. "Then he will fall." Silence hung in the air. The War Council knew better than to argue with the Queen. She had conquered hundreds of systems through sheer ruthless efficiency. Her strategy had never failed. But Drekvar's hesitation lingered. She turned her gaze back to the image of Ryan Carter. A single human. A speck of dust in the grand design of the universe. And yet, something about the way he stood, the way he had defied death itself, irritated her. Humans were supposed to be weak. Predictable. Beasts driven by emotion. But this one was different. With a flick of her wrist, the hologram vanished. "Prepare the fleet," she commanded. "We end this game. Send a message to the humans. Their time is up." Drekvar bowed and turned to leave, but Zyra's voice stopped him. "And if this warrior dares to stand against me again," her lips curled into a sinister smile, "bring him to me alive. I wish to see this so-called legend break with my own eyes." Deep in the far reaches of the galaxy, on the remains of a war-torn planet, Ryan Carter stared at the transmission that flickered on his console. The message was clear. The Zycrans were coming. He exhaled, running a hand through his unkempt hair. His body still bore the scars of the last war, reminders of battles he should not have survived. He had hoped, foolishly, that they had left Earth alone. That they had moved on. But he knew better. The Zykrins never stopped. They never showed mercy. And now, they were returning to finish what they had started. He glanced at the rusted dog tags hanging around his neck, the names of fallen comrades etched into the metal. They had died fighting. And now, it was his turn once again. Ryan tightened his grip on his weapon. If the Zykrins wanted a war, he would give them one. The wind howled through the shattered remains of an old military outpost, a relic from a war humanity barely survived. Ryan Carter stood at the edge of a crumbling rooftop, staring at the dark sky above. The stars had always fascinated him once, back when he was a child, back when he dreamed of exploring them. Now, he looked at them with nothing but suspicion. Somewhere out there, the Zykrin fleet was moving, engines roaring through the void, closing in on Earth with the cold certainty of executioners approaching their prey. The transmission still flickered on his wrist console, repeating the same ominous message. It wasn't a warning, it was a death sentence. The Zykrins weren't offering surrender. This time, there would be no survivors, no negotiations. They were coming to wipe humanity from existence. Ryan exhaled sharply, forcing his thoughts into order. He had spent the last 3 years trying to disappear, to leave the war behind. But the war had never truly left him. It lingered in his bones, in the aching scars across his body, in the nightmares that never faded. And now, it was calling him back. He turned, descending the ruined building with practiced ease, boots crunching against debris as he made his way to his hidden shelter. The place was nothing more than a repurposed underground bunker, but it was secure. At least, it had been until now. He powered up the central console, activating a network he had sworn never to use again. A list of contacts appeared, old names from a past he had buried. Some were marked deceased, others simply MIA, and a handful still online. He sent the message anyway. "We need to talk. Now." Minutes later, the responses began flooding in. Some were brief acknowledgments, others filled with curses and reluctance. None of them surprised him. They had all given everything in the last war. Most had nothing left to give. One, however, caught his attention. A small encrypted ping flashed across his screen. Coordinates. A meeting place. No name, no words, just a silent agreement. Ryan's fingers hovered over the keys, hesitation creeping in. Then he clenched his jaw and shut the console down. He didn't have the luxury of doubt. By the time he reached the rendezvous point, the night had settled in completely, swallowing the landscape in shadows. The meeting place was an abandoned airfield, long since stripped of anything useful. Ryan approached cautiously, his instincts sharp as ever. The moment he stepped onto the cracked pavement, a figure emerged from the darkness. She was taller than he remembered, her movements as fluid as ever, a shadow slipping effortlessly through the night. Dr. Elise Voss. Former Zykrin scientist, former traitor to her own kind, and the only reason Ryan had survived the last war. "You took your time," she said, her voice calm, as if they were meeting under normal circumstances. Ryan crossed his arms. "Didn't think I'd be hearing from you again." She smirked, the faintest trace of amusement flickering across her sharp features. "I could say the same about you. You're supposed to be dead." "Yeah, well. I got tired of waiting." He tilted his head slightly. "You said you had information." Elise nodded, reaching into her coat and pulling out a small holographic device. She activated it, and suddenly, the air between them was filled with projections, Zykrin fleet movements, battle strategies, and something far more disturbing. Ryan's stomach tightened as he took in the details. This wasn't just an invasion. The Zykrins weren't here to conquer. They were here to harvest. Elisa's voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. "They've developed a new program. They're not just wiping out humanity, Ryan. They're using us. Genetic harvesting, forced assimilation. They've figured out how to splice human DNA with their own to create an enhanced warrior species. Stronger, faster, more adaptable. Ryan's fists clenched. And let me guess. That's why they're coming back. We're not just a nuisance anymore. We're a resource. She nodded. Exactly. And they don't just want any humans. They want soldiers. Survivors. The strongest, the most resilient. Her eyes met his, steady and grim. They want you. Ryan let out a slow breath. Of course they did. He had spent years evading them, surviving when he should have died. The Zykrans had learned from their mistakes. This time, they weren't leaving anything to chance. Do they know I'm alive? Elise hesitated. Not for sure. But they suspect. And if they find out? They'll come for me first, Ryan finished for her. The air between them was thick with unspoken weight. Ryan looked at the holographic projections again, his mind calculating the odds. They weren't good. But then again, they never had been. He took a step back, inhaling deeply. I need a team. Elise crossed her arms. I was hoping you'd say that. She tapped a command into the device, and new images appeared. Survivors. Fighters. The last remnants of humanity's best warriors, scattered across different locations, waiting for a reason to fight again. Ryan studied each name carefully. Some he knew. Some he didn't. But they were all that was left. And they would have to be enough. He turned his gaze back to Elise. We're going to stop them. Not just delay them, end this. A slow, determined smile spread across her face. Then let's get to work. As the night stretched on, plans were made, weapons secured, and messages sent. The war wasn't over. Not yet. And for the first time in years, Ryan Carter allowed himself to hope. The warship loomed in the darkness, its jagged, metallic hull absorbing what little starlight remained in the void. It was Zykran-made, a thing of brutal efficiency, crafted for one purpose, conquest. But tonight, it would serve a different mission. It would be stolen. Ryan crouched behind a stack of rusted cargo containers, his pulse steady despite the weight of what was about to happen. The plan was reckless, borderline suicidal. But then again, so was every plan that had ever worked. Beside him, Elise adjusted her wrist console, disabling one of the perimeter security scans with a few quick commands. A soft beep confirmed success. That's the last of them, she whispered. We're clear for 2 minutes. After that, the ship's internal defenses will reactivate, and we're dead. Ryan gave a single nod. Then we don't waste time. He turned to the 3 others who had joined them for this mission, Jackson Rigg, a demolitions expert with more scars than patience, Tessa Vale, a former pilot who could fly anything that moved, and Milo Kern, a hacker who had once shut down an entire Zykran outpost with nothing but a stolen datapad and a bad attitude. They weren't an army, but they were all he had. All right, Ryan said, keeping his voice low. You all know what to do. We take control of that ship, set course for the Zykran flagship, and plant enough explosives to send Queen Zyra a personal message from humanity. No mistakes. No second chances. We move fast and hit hard. Jackson grinned, slapping a pack of charges onto his belt. You had me at, explode. Tessa cracked her knuckles. Just get me in that pilot's seat. Milo sighed, tapping away at his wrist console. And let me guess, I get to babysit the security systems so we don't all get turned into space dust. Ryan gave him a sharp look. Do your job, and you'll live long enough to complain about it later. Without another word, they moved. The docking bay was dimly lit, filled with the low hum of Zykran machinery. It was eerily quiet, only a handful of alien guards patrolling the walkways. Elise had warned them, the Zykrans didn't expect an infiltration here. Their arrogance worked in Ryan's favor. He motioned for his team to spread out. Tessa reached the first guard in an instant, slipping behind him and driving a knife into the gap between his armor plates before he could even make a sound. Jackson set a timed charge on a power relay, rigging it to blow the moment they were airborne. Ryan moved quickly, dispatching another guard with a clean shot to the head. For a brief moment, it seemed like everything was going too smoothly. Then the alarms blared. Milo cursed under his breath. They just switched to a secondary network, damn it. I need 60 seconds to override the lockdown. Ryan didn't have 60 seconds. The corridor ahead lit up with the glow of Zycron energy weapons, and then the air erupted in fire. They dived for cover as a barrage of plasma shots scorched the metal walls around them. Ryan rolled behind a supply crate, returning fire with precise bursts. One Zycron soldier dropped. Then another. But more were coming, emerging from the far end of the docking bay, their armor gleaming under the flickering red emergency lights. Tessa! Get to the ship now! Ryan barked. She was already moving, dodging gunfire as she sprinted toward the docking ramp. Jackson tossed a grenade over the crates, sending two Zycron warriors flying backwards in a mess of fire and twisted metal. Elise fired two quick shots, dropping another before reloading. Milo, we don't have time, she shouted. Almost there, he muttered, fingers flying across his console. And, done. The moment the security grid dropped, the ship's main hatch hissed open. Ryan didn't waste time. Go. Go. They ran for it, bullets and plasma fire streaking past them. Jackson paused just long enough to lob another explosive at the advancing Zycrons before sprinting up the ramp behind the others. The second the last of them was inside, Ryan slammed his fist against the control panel, sealing the hatch shut. Tessa, get us off this rock. She was already in the cockpit, hands flying over the controls. The ship trembled beneath them as the engines roared to life. The docking clamps resisted at first, but a well-placed override from Milo forced them to release. The ship lurched forward, engines burning bright, and then they were soaring out of the docking bay and into the vast emptiness of space. Ryan barely had a second to breathe before the proximity alarms wailed. Multiple enemy ships inbound. Milo shouted. Tessa gritted her teeth, yanking the controls hard to the right. The stolen Zycron vessel dove into an evasive maneuver just as the first barrage of enemy fire streaked past. They figured out we're not one of theirs real fast, Jackson muttered, gripping the side of his seat. Ryan didn't respond. His mind was already ahead, focused on what came next. They had the ship. That was the easy part. Now came the real mission, the one that would decide the fate of humanity. Destroying Queen Zyra's mothership. He activated the ship's comms, his voice sharp and clear. We stay low, move fast, and punch through before they can organize. Our destination is the Zycron flagship. We take it down, we take her down. A brief silence filled the cabin, broken only by the sound of the engines roaring. Then Jackson let out a low whistle. We really are crazy, aren't we? Ryan allowed himself a small, grim smile. Only if we fail. Tessa pulled the ship into hyperspeed, the stars stretching into endless lines as they vanished into the void. The war wasn't over. But tonight, humanity was fighting back. The stolen Zycron warship tore through space like a ghost slipping through the cracks of a crumbling fortress. Its engines burned hot, leaving behind a faint trail of energy as it streaked toward its target, the Zycron flagship, the heart of the enemy fleet. Ryan Carter stood near the cockpit, his gaze locked on the holographic display of the massive vessel ahead. It was a behemoth of metal and death, stretching miles across, its dark hull reflecting the distant light of a dying star. The Zycrons called it Zyra's Wrath, the Queen's personal warship, a fortress in space, and the executioner of entire worlds. His fingers tightened around the back of Tessa's pilot seat. How long before they detect us? Milo, hunched over a secondary console, barely glanced up. We're cloaked against basic scans, but once we get within 5,000 kilometers, their deep-range sensors will see right through us. Ryan exhaled. That gave them 10 minutes, 10 minutes before every Zycran in the system knew they were coming. Elise leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. We're outnumbered. Outgunned. We need a way inside before they blast us into atoms. Jackson smirked, adjusting the straps on his gear. Good thing I brought gifts. He held up a small device, an ion charge, designed to send out an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to knock out nearby shields for exactly 45 seconds. Get us close enough, and I'll give you a door where there isn't one. Ryan nodded. That's our way in. Tessa, bring us in low, right under their docking bay. We use the ion charge to disable the shields, cut through their hull, and breach directly into their security wing. Tessa shot him a look. And if they detect us before then? Ryan's lips curled into a grim smile. Then we fight our way in. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken understanding. None of them had illusions about what they were up against. The Zycran flagship wasn't just another battleship, it was the battleship. The center of their entire war effort. If they failed here, there would be no second chances. 5 minutes, Milo muttered. Starting to see the flagship's deeper defenses now. Their internal security grid is running on a closed system, no way to hack it from the outside. We'll have to do it manually once we're inside. Ryan turned to the team. Gear up. Once we breach, we move fast. We stick together, we clear every room, and we don't stop until we reach the central core. Jackson grinned. Just another suicide mission with Ryan Carter. Wouldn't miss it. They suited up in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Each of them had been here before, on the edge of death, facing impossible odds. And yet, they kept coming back. Kept fighting. Because if they didn't, no one else would. Tessa's voice cut through the tension. We're in position. The Zycran flagship loomed ahead, a floating titan of war, its weapons systems dormant. For now. Ryan turned to Jackson. Do it. Jackson planted the ion charge against the hull and activated the timer. A single, high-pitched beep signaled the countdown. 5 seconds. The ship shuddered as energy rippled outward in a silent wave, distorting the space around them. 4. A section of the Zycran flagship's shielding flickered, just for a moment. 3. Tessa pushed the stolen ship forward, sliding into position just beneath the exposed hull. 2. Elise activated the hull-cutting laser, slicing a perfect entry point. 1. Ryan was the first through. The breach led into a dimly lit maintenance corridor, the cold metallic air thick with the hum of distant engines. The moment his boots hit the floor, his rifle was up, scanning for movement. Jackson came in next, then Elise, then Milo, each of them slipping into formation like gears in a machine. Tessa's voice crackled over their comms. I'll keep the ship running. You've got 20 minutes before their backup generators override the ion charge and power up their security systems again. Ryan clicked his comm once in acknowledgement. No words needed. They were on borrowed time. They moved quickly, navigating through the labyrinth of corridors toward the security wing. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. The air was thick with tension, a silence that pressed down on them like a predator waiting to strike. Then, just as they rounded a corner. Motion. Ryan dropped to one knee, rifle up. A Zycran patrol unit, 3 soldiers, their exoskeletal armor gleaming under the faint red emergency lights. The first shot was his. A single bullet pierced the nearest Zycran's skull, dropping him instantly. Before the others could react, Jackson lobbed a concussion grenade into the corridor. The explosion sent them sprawling, their weapons clattering to the floor. Ryan didn't hesitate. He surged forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the second soldier's throat. The Zycran gurgled, clawing at his shattered windpipe before collapsing. Elise finished the last one with a clean shot to the head. Milo exhaled. So much for a quiet entrance. Keep moving, Ryan ordered. They pressed forward, reaching the security control room in under 5 minutes. The chamber was lined with holographic consoles, glowing with streams of alien data. This was their first objective, shutting down internal defenses before the alarm reached the Queen. Milo cracked his knuckles. Give me a minute. Ryan stood by the door, pulse steady. He knew they didn't have a minute. And then, footsteps. Heavy ones. Incoming, Elise warned, pressing against the wall. A moment later, the doors burst open, and Zycran enforcers stormed in, their weapons already blazing. Ryan barely had time to throw himself behind cover before plasma fire ripped through the room, searing across the consoles. Sparks exploded in the air as the walls burned under the assault. Jackson cursed. Milo, work faster. Milo didn't look up. I am. Ryan popped out of cover, squeezing off 3 rapid shots. 2 Zycrans fell. A third staggered but kept coming. Elise ducked low, slashing a knife across a soldier's leg before putting a round through his skull. Jackson detonated a charge, sending fire and debris flying. The force knocked several Zycrans back, but more were coming. Ryan gritted his teeth. They were being pinned down. If Milo didn't get the defenses offline now. Done. Milo shouted. The room's alarms died instantly. The security doors slammed shut, cutting off the reinforcements outside. Ryan exhaled sharply. Status? Milo smirked. We just locked down half their damn ship. Jackson grinned. And the other half? Milo's smirk faded. Well, they're probably headed straight for us. Ryan checked his ammo, then looked at the corridor ahead. They weren't stopping. Not now. They had one objective left, Queen Zyra. And one way or another, this ended tonight. The silence after the battle was brief, too brief. The metallic stench of burnt circuits and scorched alien flesh lingered in the air. Smoke curled from shattered consoles, and the flickering emergency lights bathed the security room in an eerie, crimson glow. Ryan stood at the center of it all, pulse steady, rifle hot from the last exchange of gunfire. His team had survived, barely. Jackson wiped a smear of blood from his cheek, breathing hard. Elise reloaded her pistol with practiced efficiency. Milo slumped against the main console, his fingers still hovering over the interface. That's the last of their internal defenses, Milo muttered. For now. Ryan's eyes flicked toward the door, beyond which lay the heart of the Zycran flagship, and their real objective. Then we move. The Queen's command chamber is 6 levels up. We take her out, we end this war. Jackson cracked his knuckles. You say that like she's just gonna sit there and let us. She's not, Elise said flatly. She's expecting us. They all knew it. Queen Zyra wasn't like other Zycrans. She wasn't just a ruler, she was their greatest warrior. She had led the invasion of Earth herself, stood on the smoldering ruins of entire cities, and watched as humanity's forces crumbled beneath her command. And now, she was waiting for them. Tessa's voice crackled over their comms. Bad news, team. Zycran ships just locked down the hangar bay. I can't get out, and worse, you can't either. Ryan's jaw tightened. They know we're here. Milo let out a sharp exhale. Yeah, well, if they didn't before, they do now. I just intercepted an internal transmission. Zyra's moving to the throne chamber, she's gathering her elite guard. Jackson smirked. Good. I was getting bored. Ryan didn't respond. There was no turning back. No escape plan. The only way out was through the queen herself. He motioned for his team to move, and they did, swift, silent, efficient. They navigated the corridors with weapons ready, stepping over the bodies of fallen guards. The Zycran flagship was eerily quiet now, the vast halls filled only with the distant hum of the ship's core. But Ryan knew better than to trust the silence. As they approached the lift that would take them to the throne chamber, Elise suddenly raised a fist. "Stop!" Ryan froze. His instincts screamed danger, but he didn't see anything, until he looked closer. The walls weren't walls. They were watching them. Dark, armored shapes were embedded in the metallic surface, blending seamlessly into the Zycran architecture. Then, as one, they moved, emerging like shadows peeling away from the void. Zycran void cloaks. Elite assassins. Silent. Deadly. Almost unstoppable. The attack came instantly. Ryan barely had time to duck as a blade hissed through the air where his head had been. Elise fired twice. One bullet hit nothing but empty space, the other found its mark, shattering the skull of one assassin before she was forced to roll aside. Jackson roared as a void cloak slammed into him, driving a plasma dagger toward his chest. He twisted at the last second, grabbing the assassin's wrist and snapping it with brutal force before slamming his fist into the creature's throat. Milo was already scrambling backward, pulling out a small EMP grenade. He flung it into the corridor, and the moment it exploded, the cloaking shields flickered, revealing the remaining void cloaks. Ryan fired. One shot, dead center mass. Elise took out another with a well-placed blade through the throat. Jackson handled the last, pinning it against the wall before crushing its skull against the metal paneling. Then, just as quickly as the fight had begun, it was over. Jackson let out a breath. Void cloaks? She really doesn't want us getting to her. Ryan ignored him and turned toward the lift. Then let's not keep her waiting. They stepped inside. Milo pressed the override, and the doors slid shut. The ascent was silent. Each of them knew what came next. There would be no distractions. No more hidden defenses. Just them, and the Queen. When the doors opened, the throne chamber stretched before them, vast and shadowed. And there, standing at its center, was Queen Zyra. She was clad in obsidian armor, her 6-foot frame imposing, her glowing crimson eyes locked onto Ryan with something almost like amusement. A Zycran warblade rested in her clawed hands, humming with barely contained energy. "So," she said, her voice smooth yet filled with contempt, "this is what humanity sends to kill me?" Ryan stepped forward. His rifle was ready, but he didn't fire. "Not yet. You invaded our planet," he said. "Burned our cities. Killed billions. We're here to return the favor." Zyra tilted her head slightly. "And you believe you can?" Elise raised her pistol. "We don't believe. We know." Zyra smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Then she moved. The air shattered as she surged forward with inhuman speed, her blade flashing in the dim light. Ryan barely raised his rifle before she was on him. The first strike sent him skidding backward, his gun knocked from his grip. Elise fired, Zyra dodged with unnatural grace, spinning mid-air and landing a brutal kick that sent Elise crashing against the wall. Jackson roared, charging forward, his fist swung, but Zyra was faster. She sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted, flipping him onto his back in a blur of motion. Milo dove for cover, frantically typing commands into his wrist console, trying to disable whatever security systems she had left. Ryan hit the ground hard, his vision flickering, but he didn't stop moving. He rolled just in time to avoid the warblade slicing down toward his chest. The floor cracked apart where the weapon struck. "Stronger than I expected," Zyra mused, stepping back. "But not strong enough." Ryan grabbed his sidearm and fired. Twice. The first shot missed. The second didn't. Zyra staggered, a wound searing against her shoulder. She hissed, eyes flashing with something far from pain. She was enjoying this. Ryan gritted his teeth. This wasn't going to be easy. Zyra raised her warblade again, her voice a whisper of cruel amusement. Let's see how long you last, human. Ryan barely had time to react before Zyra attacked again. She moved like a storm, faster than any human should be able to track. Her warblade carved through the air, a shimmering arc of death aimed straight at Ryan's throat. He ducked, barely missing the strike as the weapon sliced clean through a metal pillar behind him, sending sparks flying. Jackson lunged from the side, fists raised to strike, but Zyra anticipated it. She twisted, catching his punch mid-air and redirecting his momentum, sending him crashing into Elise before either of them could react. Ryan rolled aside and grabbed his fallen rifle, snapping off 3 quick shots. Zyra deflected them all. Her warblade hummed with energy, swiping left, right, disintegrating the bullets before they even touched her armor. Milo cursed from behind cover, frantically working on his wrist console. Give me 30 seconds. I'm trying to overload her ship's gravity field. Ryan didn't have 30 seconds. Zyra surged forward again, slamming a brutal knee into Ryan's ribs. The impact sent him skidding across the floor, his armor barely absorbing the blow. Pain shot through his side, but he clenched his teeth and forced himself up. Elise and Jackson attacked together, flanking from both sides. Elisa's blade flashed toward Zyra's exposed back. Jackson's fist aimed for her jaw. Neither attack landed. Zyra vanished. Not teleportation, just raw, inhuman speed. She reappeared behind them, driving an elbow into Jackson's spine and kicking Elise away in the same motion. Both hit the ground hard. Ryan's heart pounded. She was playing with them. She could have killed them by now, but she hadn't. Zyra flicked a speck of dust off her warblade, watching Ryan with those cold, burning eyes. You're different, she said, tilting her head slightly. I've fought your kind before. Broken them. Crushed them. But you, she paused, considering. You keep getting up. Ryan spat blood and steadied his rifle. Yeah. Get used to it. Zyra smiled. Let's see how much more you can endure. She attacked again, this time, aiming to kill. Ryan dodged, barely avoiding a blazing swipe of her warblade. The weapon sliced through the metal floor like paper, leaving molten steel in its wake. Jackson roared and tackled her from behind, locking his arms around her shoulders in a desperate hold. Now, Milo! Ryan shouted. Milo slammed his fist onto his wrist console. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a deep, bone-rattling hum filled the room. The artificial gravity inside the throne chamber shifted violently. Zyra stumbled. Her speed, her unnatural balance, was suddenly off. Ryan didn't waste the opportunity. He rushed forward, tackling Zyra head-on. The impact sent both of them crashing to the ground, rolling across the chamber floor as the gravity system flickered erratically. Jackson and Elise recovered quickly. Elise grabbed her blade, slashing at Zyra's exposed leg. The blade pierced through her armor, drawing black, smoking blood. Zyra hissed in pain. For the first time, she bled. Jackson followed up with a brutal kick to her chest, sending her staggering backward. Ryan grabbed his fallen rifle and aimed. He had a clean shot. Then, Zyra disappeared again. A split second later, she was behind Milo. Her warblade sliced downward. Milo barely dodged. The blade shattered the console beside him, sending sparks and debris everywhere. Zyra's eyes burned with pure, cold fury. She was done playing. Ryan fired. The bullet struck her in the side. Zyra let out a sharp snarl of pain, stumbling again as the gravity field fluctuated wildly. Ryan charged, slamming into her, fists swinging. He didn't stop. Punch. 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 She blocked the first two. The third, he landed. Zyra's head snapped back as Ryan's fist connected, cracking the reinforced plating of her helmet. She recovered almost instantly, but not fast enough. Elise and Jackson hit her at the same time, driving her against the wall. Milo finally overrode the ship's failing systems. "I'm shutting down the core, brace yourselves." The ship lurched violently. Everything tilted. Zyra's footing failed. Ryan saw his chance. He grabbed Jackson's fallen explosive charge and slammed it onto Zyra's chest. Her eyes widened. "Goodbye, Queen," Ryan growled. He punched the detonator. The explosion tore through the throne chamber, engulfing Zyra in a blinding, concussive fireball. The force threw Ryan backward, his ears ringing as he hit the ground hard. Smoke filled the air. Sparks rained from the collapsing ceiling. For a few agonizing seconds, everything was silent. Then, movement. Ryan's breath caught. Through the haze, a charred figure emerged. Zyra was still alive. Her armor was cracked, her warblade flickering, black blood pouring from open wounds. But she was still standing. She staggered forward, breathing heavily. Ryan raised his rifle again. Zyra looked at him, not with rage, not with hatred, but with something else. Understanding. Recognition. "You are not like the others," she murmured, voice hoarse. "You fight like us." Ryan didn't lower his gun. "I fight for my people." Zyra's gaze flickered. "Perhaps, that is why humanity refuses to break." She wavered. Then, to Ryan's shock, she smiled. A slow, almost respectful smile. Then she collapsed. The throne chamber shuddered as the ship's systems failed completely. Tessa's voice crackled through the comms. "Guys. We've got a big problem." Ryan's chest heaved. "What now?" "The ship's going down." Ryan's eyes widened. Tessa's voice was frantic. "You need to get out of there, now." The floor beneath them shook violently, as if the entire ship was tearing apart at the seams. Ryan looked down at the fallen queen. He had won. But the fight wasn't over yet. The entire ship trembled, metal groaning under the stress of catastrophic failure. Warning sirens howled across the corridors, flashing red lights painting everything in an ominous glow. The Zycran flagship, the heart of the invasion fleet, was dying. Ryan didn't waste time. He grabbed Jackson by the arm, yanking him to his feet. Elise was already moving, shaking off the pain from the last battle. Milo, still dazed, clutched his wrist console, trying to stabilize the systems, but it was too late. Tessa's voice crackled through their comms. "Guys, you have 60 seconds before this ship breaks apart. Get to the evac zone now." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Move." They sprinted toward the exit, leaping over shattered debris, dodging falling support beams. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, making each step unpredictable. One moment their feet felt too heavy, the next they were nearly floating. Behind them, the queen lay motionless. Ryan slowed. Something inside him hesitated. She was their enemy. She had led the slaughter of billions. She didn't deserve mercy. And yet. He glanced back at Jackson and Elise, both panting, battered, bleeding. If the roles were reversed, would Zyra have spared them? No. But that didn't mean they had to be like her. "Jackson, help me," Ryan said. Jackson blinked. "Wait, you're not serious." Ryan ignored him, kneeling beside the queen's broken form. Zyra was barely conscious, her glowing eyes flickering weakly. Blood, thick, dark, alien blood, seeped from the cracks in her armor. Ryan grabbed her under the arms. "Help me carry her." Jackson muttered a curse but obeyed, lifting Zyra's legs as they started dragging her toward the exit. Elise gave them a bewildered look but said nothing. There was no time to argue. Milo stumbled ahead, guiding them toward the docking bay, where their stolen Zycran transport awaited. The ship shuddered again. This time, a deep, bone-rattling explosion rocked the entire structure. "The core's about to go," Milo shouted. "We won't survive the blast radius unless we're out of here in the next 30 seconds. Ryan pushed himself harder. His muscles burned as he carried Zyra's heavy form, but he refused to let go. The docking bay loomed ahead, the stolen Zycran dropship's doors open, its engines already humming with power. Tessa was inside, yelling. "Hurry up." Ryan and Jackson hauled Zyra into the ship, collapsing onto the cold metal floor as Elise and Milo scrambled aboard. "Go!" Ryan shouted. Tessa didn't need to be told twice. The ship's thrusters roared to life, the doors slammed shut, and the entire dropship lurched violently as it blasted away from the crumbling flagship. Ryan struggled to sit up, heart pounding as he looked through the viewport. The Zycran flagship was imploding, its massive structure collapsing inward as fire and debris consumed the sky. Other Zycran warships nearby began to scatter, their once unbreakable fleet falling into chaos. They had done it. The Queen's flagship, the symbol of Zycran dominance, was gone. The war was far from over, but this was a turning point. Ryan slumped back against the metal wall, exhaustion weighing him down. Across from him, Jackson wiped sweat from his brow, staring at Zyra's unconscious body. "Tell me again why we just rescued the alien warlord who murdered half our planet." Ryan took a deep breath, still watching the burning wreckage outside. "Because if we're going to win this war, we need to change the rules." Jackson snorted. "She's gonna kill us the second she wakes up." "Maybe," Ryan admitted. "Or maybe she'll finally see what makes humanity different." Elise folded her arms. "And if she doesn't?" Ryan met her gaze. "Then we put her down." The ship flew into the void, leaving behind the shattered remnants of Zycran rule. And in the silence of the cargo hold, Queen Zyra's eyes slowly opened.